I'm not really sure what's going to happen here in the message. Not because I didn't plan, but because I did plan and it didn't completely show up in the 9:30 service. Every now and then I prepare and I get into it and then Jesus says, no, we're going to go this way now. And I've learned to trust that because more often than not, where we end up is where someone needed me to go. And had I not gone, you would have left without a word from the Lord that you came seeking. And I do think, at least it's my prayer, that y'all come seeking a word from the Lord, seeking experience of the love of God in your life, in community. We've tried to pride ourselves on being a church that's not for folks who want to come and sit in the audience to watch the professionals do stuff on stage. And if you're here very long, you realize I'm not much of a professional anyway. So we really do gather on Sunday mornings, 9:30, 11 o'clock every single week so that one thing can happen, and that's that you can meet with Jesus. We want to do that for folks who show up with no desire at all or intention to meet with Jesus because we believe Jesus is here and he'll meet with you even if you don't want him to. That's just the way he is. But by and large, many of us come into the room because we know that we need some time with him. We've not made time for him throughout the week, and we start feeling all this like shame and guilt about not spending time with the Lord. Here, let's just try it out for size. Don't raise your hand, but just make a mental note of how many of you prayed before you came to church today? Like, you don't get to take credit for the prayers we prayed in the room. But when you woke up this morning, did you pray? Did you pray over your coffee or your breakfast or the donut? Did you spend any time with the Lord before you came? It's possible that some of us have kind of conditioned ourselves that on Sundays, we know we're going to go meet with the Lord, and so we kind of bypass the normal morning routine so that we can go and spend time with the Lord at church. As I admitted to the first service, I'm here to meet with the Lord. Preaching is what's on my job description, and quite honestly, I could give it away and not really miss it a lot. But what I can't give away is meeting with you and watching your eyes and your hearts be opened to this overwhelming, profound love of God that's pursuing you. And to meet every week until I start to see eyes glimmer with evidence that you've found it or that he's found you. That's why we gather, and that's why I keep showing up. And I'm going to keep showing up because I carry a real burden for y'all. That this would be the place where if there's no other place for you to meet with Jesus, that you find him here. And then consider taking him where you go. Now, I did pray this morning. Now, my prayer was a little interesting. This is just one more bit of evidence I'm not a professional. So every morning, including this morning, I wake up to these words. And if my wife's still in bed, which during the weekdays, typically she's already up and getting ready, so it's not as weird. She doesn't hear me. When she's still in the bed, I say it to myself so as not to shake her. Wake up, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. That's straight from the scriptures, and it's a prayer I pray every single morning to wake myself up to the reality that I'm not walking through this day by myself, but also that I have been asleep and I need to wake up. Then I roll into another prayer, and it goes like this. Jesus, I belong to you. And I kind of hear him say back, and I belong to you too. And then I say to him, Jesus, I give my heart to you. I can almost hear him saying back, you have mine too. This has kind of emerged over time, since I can hear him saying it right back. I give my heart to you. And then I move, the very next thing I say is, I offer my mind. I give you my mind. It's my way of saying, Jesus, I need you to form my thoughts today because on my own, I can think of some pretty bad things. I need your mind. And then I say, I set my eyes on you. I want to see you today. I want to see what you're doing so I can point that out to people around me. I want to have eyes to see today. And then I say something that's quoted actually out of Romans chapter 12. We talked about it a few weeks ago in here. I say, Jesus, I offer my body to you as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to you. It's like a reminder that my physical self is itself an offering to God. How I move through my day is a gift to God. The gifts that I have in me, those being poured out on other people unselfishly, that's something that Jesus wants from me. And so I commit to it in the mornings. And then I just finished, Jesus, I belong to you. Now, that was my prayer this morning. And I got up out of bed. I rolled out of bed. I said all to myself so that my wife could keep sleeping. I get out of bed and I go and I start making coffee. And unbeknownst to me, a couple of my friends down at Restoration were trying to get in touch with me. Their associate and their executive pastor they had both called me and not left a message. And immediately my mind went, I wonder what's wrong with Greg, senior pastor. And I immediately started praying for Greg. I didn't know what I was praying for or what I was praying about. I just had the sense that maybe there was something going. Well, then thankfully they texted me. And it wasn't Greg. Well, maybe Greg needed some prayer over his anxiety, but all of their sound was gone. They didn't have any sound, and they had an 8 o'clock service coming very, very soon. And they were like scrambling. And so they text me, they say, hey, we need 4 100-foot, some sort of cable, like AXL or PXL or something. I don't even know what those things are. But they text me and they said, we need these things. And so I said, God, would you find a way to help provide that for them? If we have it, would you get somebody to get them from us to them as soon as possible? God, if there's no reason to have all these cords, would you give them a Sunday morning of worship where they can go without needing those wires? That's just kind of how my prayers started going. Doesn't sound very spiritual, does it? But I've learned and I'm learning that there's nothing that the Lord doesn't want to hear about. Nothing. And truth be told, sometimes y'all have said some things to yourself of the Lord, some prayers you've prayed to the Lord that you probably don't want to admit saying out loud either. But this is what we do. And the bottom line is, and the truth of it is, God wants to hear from you. What I want you to hear from me today is that prayer may or may not be what you've always thought it was. And I'm hoping that in the little bit of time we have left together this morning, that maybe I can shift your thinking, your focus, your mind a little bit around what is prayer, why do we do it, is there a right way to do it, is there a formula, can prayer work or not work, and is that on me or is that on God? I'm gonna try to handle some of that while we're together, and I probably won't get it all covered. As I said last service, prayer is a gamble. It's a gamble, and I've learned that in my own mind, in my own life experience. So what I wanna make sure you know about, though, is that prayer can be things we speak and prayer can be things we listen, but always, 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 prayer is time spent in the presence of the Lord. A 12-year-old said in a little book I was reading that prayer is the evidence that I'm with God. That's it. It's as simple as that. But I wanted you to see this because most of the time our prayers are spoken prayers, either to ourselves or out loud, and they're prayers expressing to God something that we want or something that we need. And honestly, sometimes we get those two things mixed. Praying for something that I say I need, but I really just want, right? But here's the thing. It's important to say those things out loud. The Lord says, make your requests known to me. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you need, despite the fact that he already knows before we say it what we need, because he knows us that well. But he says, name it. Make yourself aware of it. Make me aware of it. If you're praying in community, make others aware of your need. This is important to us. So here in our church, we have these prayer request cards. They're on the wooden boxes at the exits. And I'm just gonna say, I've always been a little bit curious about something. Prayer is something that when I said, had any of y'all prayed, you like immediately went, oh crud, I should have done that. I should have done that more. Prayer is a gift. And it's a gift that I'm convinced we don't take advantage of. It's an opportunity for you to get the attention of the one who created all things and who gave you the last breath you just breathed without you even giving thanks for it. And so we want to know how we can pray for you. We want to come on your behalf and tell God that we would like him to do some things in your lives. Now here's the thing. Today in worship, between our 9:30 and 11 o'clock service, there'll probably be 500 or 600 people here in worship. You know how many prayer requests are going to come in? Maybe 3, maybe 5. And I just keep thinking, surely I'm not the only one in the room who needs prayer. Surely I'm not the only one in the room who's struggling in one area or another of my life. Surely I'm not the only one who has a sick or dying relative. Surely I'm not the only one who's trying to break an addiction, get my mind right and turn onto a better way of thinking about things or doing things. Surely I'm not the only one. And so I said to the first service, I'm going to say it now, and again, much to Pam's chagrin. If you have her cell phone, I want you to text her often with prayer concerns. She leads our prayer ministry. We have a prayer team that's looking for reasons to pray and looking for people to pray for, and they've got 4 or 5 people on a given week to pray for out of the hundreds that we're here on a Sunday morning. If you ask yourself this question, is that something worth prayer? The answer is yes, every time. I don't even care what's following the rest of that remark. And text Pam and tell her you want her to pray for her. It's a challenge to you. And my hope is that she becomes so busy, so preoccupied with praying and telling others to pray that she can't get anything else done. Now, I know that that's not what she wants because she's a doer. But I can tell you about Pam's heart that the most important thing to Pam is not getting it done, but praying for you, being for you, placing you before the throne of God and letting God do for you and in your life things that she knows she can't do. It's really a daily act for us of humility, realizing we can't do the stuff that you need, but we know somebody who can. We want to know how we can take you to him. So if you learn nothing else from today, get her cell phone, get mine off my business card, and just demon dial us. Texting, pray for them, pray for them, pray for them. Email it to us. We'd love to pray. So please let us. Now, this persistence in prayer is something that I'm not just making up. It's something that's here in the Bible. It's in the 18th chapter of Luke, actually. It's a parable. Maybe you've heard it. He says, in a certain town, there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, grant me justice against my adversary. For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I'll see that she gets justice so that she won't eventually come and attack me. And the Lord Jesus says, listen to what that unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? This parable has been called the persistent widow and also the unjust judge. For me, I read this thing and it sounds like parenting. Kids coming up, always asking for something. Come on, can we do that? Hold on. Hey, can I have? Hey, are we gonna go? Can we eat? Maybe I'm the only parent in the room with that, but I've seen your kids, I'm not. Persistent, begging, bothering, annoying, just on and on and on. If you're a parent in the room right now, quit looking at your child. This is not fair. But in the parable, this seems to be what Jesus is saying to do with him. Hey, bring me your burdens. Bring me your concerns. Bring me your wants and your needs. Let me decide whether it's a need or a want, but bring it anyway. Come to me. Bring it with me. Be persistent. Don't stop. Keep coming. But then there's the second thing, and it's that final line in the parable. He says, however, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? Now, when I read through that, you can quickly run past it and move on, or you can get stuck in it like feet in mud, and that's kind of what I did. This idea of God saying, I've shown up. I've met your needs. So why don't you ask me for more? You've prayed and I've answered. Will you have faith? Will you have a growing faith in me that you can keep asking? Or are you going to stop asking when the time you ask, I don't respond in the way you wanted me to respond? Now, that's a real challenge because, especially for folks like us who think that we should pray, not that we get to pray, or we think that maybe we're doing it wrong. I didn't have my hands folded. I was only bowed on one knee instead of two. I was facing east instead of west. Whatever it might be, the thing about prayer is not about the way you do it, but about your trust in the faithfulness of God. And I'm convinced that as you grow in your faith of God, that he's actually there. He's actually listening. He's actually paying attention. And in your love of God and your awareness that he profoundly loves you in return, that's going to keep leading you to prayer. I mean, I'll just admit, there have been times in my own life when I've prayed for things, big things, and not gotten what I wanted. In the first service, I got so emotional talking about this because the uncle of the young man was in worship and a girl who was in our youth group at the time was in worship. I'm going to try to hold it together better in this service, but I remember as a kid, there were times when I prayed for things I didn't get. That was just sort of the thing because I was very needy and asking for a lot of different things. But as I got older, there became more important things to pray for. Relationships. I thank God I didn't get the girl that I wanted when I was younger because I ended up with a fantastic wife. Sometimes we're just grateful we don't get what we ask for. But then there's sometimes we ask for things we really wanted. We can't imagine any reason why God wouldn't give it to us. This was just one of those moments. It's one of those moments where I felt like the weight of this in a way I'd never felt it before. So I had a kid in my youth group in my very first church in the late 90s. His name's Ryan. Ryan had been in our youth group, gone off to the Navy. Some of you have heard me tell of him before. Went off to the Navy, served our country valiantly, came back after his 4 years and started to volunteer in our student ministry. He volunteered with our junior hires. He had a girlfriend that had been in our youth group as well, and they were just months from getting engaged. It was a sweet, sweet couple. Ryan was driving his motorcycle down the road when a man lost sort of awareness of where the construction zone was in the road that he was on, and he veered out of his lane accidentally and hit Ryan head on. I get this phone call from Jenny. She says, Ryan's been in a horrible accident. He's at the hospital. Can you come? Of course I'm coming. I went down to the med center. Went down to be with him, and I went with all the faith that a young, early youth pastor could take. And I took it with me. And I felt responsible for defending God and his faithfulness to this family and began to make promises to this family. And I remember, like yesterday, I'll never shake this, being in his hospital room, holding his hand in one hand and holding hers in the other, and praying that God would heal him, that the measures that the medical staff were performing on him would be successful, that his brain would stop swelling, and that he would live. He had a fiance begging for this. He had a friend and youth pastor begging for this. And I seemed to think God was listening. In fact, I was pretty convinced that not only was he listening, but he was going to do what I asked. And so with that confidence, I take the elevator down to the waiting room with Jenny, and we go, and Scott, his dad, is there. And I say, Scott, we just prayed for Ryan, and he's going to live. It's all going to work out, man. A few days later, I did my first funeral as a youth pastor. His dad played taps. That no from God sits just under the surface of my skin all the time. And if I'm honest, I'm still a little bit angry about it. I've prayed for other things, and Jesus, you gave me the answer I wanted on those. Why not this one? This seems even more important. What good are you bringing out of this? You ever been there? Maybe not with the loss of a child, though that may have been your thing. After the first service, 3 people came up to let me know. In fact, one, today was the 10-year anniversary of losing their son. There's folks in the room who have experienced this, and you're still trying to figure out why. Others of you have had other incredible losses that you prayed about, things that an addiction you've been trying to break for years that you're still struggling with, a marriage that you prayed to be healed that just continues to be a struggle in your life, a child that you wished and prayed would just come along and start acting right. All different types of prayers you pray, and you don't always get the answer that you asked for. But in the parable, Jesus says, will I find faith when I come? It's like he's asking us, hey, look, just because you didn't get the answer you were asking for doesn't mean I'm not here and I don't care. Now, there have been a lot of other times in my life where I prayed for things and God did answer. And sometimes I wish that he would have answered to the bigger things the way that he's answered the smaller things. Truth be told, if I passed that microphone around to all of you, amongst us would be countless numbers of stories of times you prayed. The Lord heard your prayer and responded exactly as you hoped. Just recently, I was praying for something that'll sound very trivial for y'all, but it was important to me. Gave me just a little bit of evidence that maybe God was still listening. I mean, don't we all need a little bit of that from time to time? I mean, it's little, it's trivial. We were at a baseball tournament, and my son hurt his knee, and he could hardly walk on it. And if I'm just brutally honest, we had spent a lot of time and money to be at that tournament, and I was really frustrated that this hurt knee was going to keep him from getting to play, just being honest. And so the day after the injury, I'm in the car on the way down to our next game, knowing he wasn't going to get to play, wondering if he'd get to play at all while we were there. And I just began to pray. And I said these audacious words. I said, Jesus, I know you want him healed. I know you want him healed. You want us all to be whole and healed. And I believe right now by faith, you're healing him in this moment. Right now, you're healing him. Your hand is on his knee. It's working. It's massaging. It's doing what only your hand can do. We went off to the games, and we came back that night, and I said, hey, bud, how's your knee? And he says, it feels great. I don't feel any pain at all. I said, wait a second. It's the same injury that took 3 weeks to heal in basketball season, but now you're saying you're good? Yeah, I've already told coach I'm ready to pitch again. So I walked into where my wife was in the other room, and I said, hey, babe, just talking to Kai, and his knee feels great. He's ready to pitch again. Really? Yeah, I prayed for that. And like a great mom, she says, you weren't the only one praying. And the next day went on the mound and had a great outing. Sounds trivial maybe to some of you, but the truth is we need little wins. We need little wins in our prayer life. Those little wins start to pile up so that we can then go to God with the big things with greater trust and confidence that he can come through. As I said before, prayer is like gambling a bit. We are so audacious to try to get the attention of the creator of the universe to pay attention to our need as if he didn't already know it. We take a risk and we say, we think we know what would be best for us. Might you do it that way? We keep trying. And sometimes it comes out just the way we hoped, and other times, like Ryan, it didn't, and you keep wondering why. Here's one of the things I'm learning about prayer. It's not about what you say. It's not about what you say at all. You can't say the right things, enough of the right things. I mean, the persistent widow story tells us to keep saying it, but at the end of the day, that's not prayer. Prayer is an excuse, an invitation, an opportunity to sit in the presence of God, to get the attention of the Creator and to spend time in his presence. The Bible seems to suggest that part of why Jesus came was to make us accessible to God. That he showed up and then left the Holy Spirit for us so that we would never have to be separate from God again, ever. Prayer is not on the list of things you ought to do or you should do. It's this gift you've been given, an opportunity, an invitation. Hey, you can at any time, in any place, with any words or no words at all, sit in the presence of God and be assured that he's sitting there, right there with you. Like, this is the promise of Scripture. Sometimes he shows up when you ask, and sometimes he shows up even when you don't. You're simply making yourself available. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen, I'm just going to end kind of in this direction. I'll give you the fast forward. I've been running out of time all morning. Jesus gave us a way to pray. His disciples came to us and said, why don't you teach us how to pray like John's been teaching his disciples, and he taught them the Lord's Prayer, the prayer that we just prayed. And in that prayer is this audacious thing of saying, God, you alone are holy. Your ways are better than my ways. Would you bring your kingdom here? Would you let your will be done, not mine? That's a hard prayer to pray, but that was the template that Jesus gave us. So keep doing that. Towards the end of Jesus' life, there's this other prayer that he actually prayed where he says, God, I just want the people to be one with me. I want them to be where I am. I want us and them to become one, which speaks to the relational nature of prayer. I just want to be with my people, and I want my people to be with me. That was it. That's all prayer was. That's all it is. But I said to you, sometimes God shows up. You weren't expecting it. It happened to me yesterday, actually. I mean, I spent all week planning and preparing a message on prayer, and out of nowhere comes this experience. I'm telling you this because I want you to be on the lookout for these kind of moments in your own life. It's God's desire to get your attention. That's a fact. He wants to find you so that he can love you, not to condemn you. He wants to love you. He wants to make himself known to you, and he'll do it however and wherever and whenever he has to. He did it to me in a very unsuspecting way just yesterday. So I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Jesus Revolution. I've seen half of it. Got to store back up some tears so I can watch the second half. Tears because I was so moved by a church and a pastor who were willing to break down the walls of a standard tradition religion to make room for folks who wanted to know the Lord. And for them to express their knowledge of the Lord in a new way, in a profound way, in a way that may have sounded a little bit different. So we're watching this movie, and I've got this 8-year-old kid. I don't know if y'all have seen him around here. You've surely heard him. And I've cleaned the house, and I was getting ready to make a steak dinner for my college son, his roommate, and my high school son, his girlfriend. And so I was trying to get the house all ready, and I said, son, we're going to go on a run in a little while. I'm going to run. You can ride your scooter. Awesome. So he goes and gets dressed for it and goes to get his scooter. He starts riding the scooter in the house, which is not against the rules in the Parker house. Because it's air conditioned, it's flat, and it's tile. It's good. So he's riding the scooter, and I'm watching Jesus Revolution. And there's a moment when he stops riding. He goes and puts his scooter down, and we have a little sectional couch thing, and I'm on one part, and he's sitting over on the other, closest to the TV. And there's a moment in the movie, I'm not going to ruin it for you, but there's a moment in the movie where a guy who thought drugs were going to lead him to, getting himself together, he comes to church at the invitation of a really drop-dead gorgeous blonde. I mean, who won't go to church then? And they show up at this church, and there's this 5 to 6 minute moment in the movie about that time. And we're watching it, and I look up, and my 8-year-old has his baseball jersey. He doesn't like to button it all the way, but he likes to show his chest. So he pulls his shirt up. He starts wiping tears out of his eyes. And I just keep watching, but I'm like, that's not what he's doing. He's wiping sweat. It's got to be sweat, because it's always sweat. But he's wiping his eyes dry. And thankfully, he was preoccupied enough in that he didn't turn and watch me as my eyes were sweating profusely with what's going on in the movie and now this recognition of my son. And I said, hey, bud, this is a good movie, huh? He says, it is. He says, it makes me want to know Jesus even better. I'm like, wow. He said, he loves us. I said, I know. Wouldn't it be awesome if everybody knew that? And then I get up and I go get dressed to go on a run. And we go outside. My shoes are out in the garage. So he gets his scooter and we walk out to the garage and I sit on the floor just outside and I'm putting my shoes on and I finish and it's easier when he pulls me up off the ground, so I kind of extend my hand for him to do that. And he says, Dad, before we run, can I pray for you? What? And that little boy bends over and he puts his sweaty palm right on the top of my head. And he starts praying words I've never heard him say. It wasn't like speaking in tongues. It was, and praying people's names. People that I know he loves. He prayed for a safe trip home for his mom. And he prayed for a safe run for us. He prayed that we'd have a good time when his brothers got home. He's always right there. Jesus. Now, my 8-year-old, Jesus. He's always right there. watching, waiting. Watching and waiting for you to catch eyes, to hear. I'm here for you. I'm with you. I'm for you. I forgive you. I want to be one with you. I want you to see my glory, and I want you to make my glory seen. That's prayer. That's prayer. Making yourself available. All of yourself available. To hear, to see, to be loved. To be loved. To be loved. I want to pray for that. I want to pray for that for y'all. God, you know how it burdens me so. You know how it burdens me so that the men and women in this community would finally get to the end of themselves, to the end of their strivings, to the end of their setting their own goals to accomplish their own stuff. You know how I long, God. The trips to the prayer closet would outweigh trips to the liquor store or the liquor cabinet. You know, God, how I long for, I'm desperate for men to start loving their wives completely and for wives to love their husbands completely. You know, because I wear you out about it. You know, God, that my deepest desire to be out of a job, that I would not even be necessary because all of the people you called me to would have fallen in love with you. There'd be no more work for me to do in this community. God, this morning you have a captive audience. You have a room full of folks who can only get up and walk out if they choose to, because I'm not sending them away. And I want to take full advantage of this time, God, because you have some sons and daughters in this room you've been chasing. You've been chasing them. They're here. They're sitting in these chairs. You once had their full attention, and somehow, over the last days, weeks, months, maybe even years, they've forgotten their first love. They didn't mean to. They just kind of got caught up in human relationships and got caught up in work, got caught up in trying to chase the American dream. But now they're sitting here and they realize that that American dream is a nightmare. It's not a dream at all, actually. It's definitely not your dream for them. God, you have some sons and daughters in the room who have forfeited a relationship with you in the process of grasping all this world could give them. And right now they know it. They're realizing it. And as they realize it, as it's coming to their minds, God, would you, in a very gentle way, in a very forgiving way, remind them you came to love them and not to judge them. You did not come to condemn them. You came to remind them that you never left them. God, I believe right now you're healing hearts in this room. You have some sons and daughters who are turning back to you right now. And I celebrate that. And I thank you for that. And God, I know there's some people who showed up today and they're trying to figure out, is this preacher always this weird? Does he always cry so much? And I thought we were going to come and get a few good songs with a good band and a good message that would stimulate my brain and I'd go home happy and satisfied. But you got here and you got trapped in a good way by the love of God. He had finally sought you long enough. And about halfway through, you stopped listening to me because you could not put away his voice that was ringing in your ears. I love you. I love you. I forgive you. I want to be friends with you. I want to be in a relationship with you. I want you to trust me with your life. I want you to believe that I've already done all the hard work, the forgiving part and the being good enough part. And I just want us to walk out of here together, friends. And I'll help you with the next step. I just got to know you're saying this to a few people in the room right now. So I pray that they'd hear it, they'd receive it. And so that they don't go home being the only one who heard it or received it, that they would tell somebody. Maybe they'd tell their spouse if they're here with a spouse. Maybe they'd tell their parent if they're here with their parent, or their child if they're here with their child. Maybe they need to tell it to another guy or another girl in the room. Maybe they needed to come tell me. God, I want to celebrate that when you tell us to ask, seek, and knock, that you don't tell us that so that you won't answer or be found or open a door. You say it so that you'll do all those things. And I believe this morning, God, we have asked and you've answered. We've been seeking and you've been found. We've knocked on the door and you're true to your word, that you'll open the door and you'll welcome us in and we'll find pasture here with you. Thank you for doing things this morning that I know I can't do, God. I just pray you keep doing more of it. All for the glory of the one we come praying in, Jesus himself. Amen.